Hello Year 10, it's Mrs. Neath. Over the next few weeks I'm going to be going through A Christmas Carol with you. Now, I think a lot of you are expecting us to be doing Shakespeare, either Romeo and Juliet or Macbeth. Don't worry, we have got time to do that when we eventually get back into school. But Christmas Carol is still part of the English literature. I've put the components on there so you can see where it fits in to the rest of the course. And it's very similar to the Blood Brothers one. That's why we've decided to go with this. So in the end, you'll get an extract question, and then you've just got to do your 5-point plans where you refer to the rest of the text. So hopefully by the summer holidays, we'll have this down, we'll know what we're doing, and then when we come back, like I say, we can crack on with the Shakespeare unit. Now, if you don't know who Dickens is, pause the video now and just have a quick look at this 2-minute clip. Just tells you a little bit more about Dickens' life. And if you don't know anything about the plot of A Christmas Carol, there's like a 5-minute video here that you can watch. We are going to get started with reading Stave 1. So in front of you, if you get your copy of A Christmas Carol that we've given out to you, and then your fact sheet as well. Now, rather than me spending the lesson times reading it to you, we're just going to go through some key extracts, annotate it and doing activities just like what we do in class. But if you don't feel comfortable reading the book to yourself, I've put a link for Stave 1 here. And then there's also a film version as well. So if you just watch it, either all of it or for the first 20 minutes, that will cover Stave 1. And then we can get started annotating. Right, the preface is what Dickens wrote at the beginning of the text. Now he's put in this couple of sentences here, the reasons for writing the book. Now the book was written in 1843, as is put there, and that's the Victorian era. A little bit of contextual information for you, but in the Victorian era, this is when the Gothic genre was becoming a lot more popular. People were interested in spirits and the afterlife. So that's why Dickens wrote this story, and he introduces that theme of the ghosts with that ghostly book there, and then also the rest of the lexical field with haunting too. And the reason that he wrote A Christmas Carol is because he wanted to raise awareness about poverty that was being experienced in Victorian times. He wanted to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor, and he wanted people, after they have read this book, to really think seriously about the moral that he is giving. He doesn't want people to forget it at all. So if you just highlight your extract with these little annotations that I've put on there, and then we can get started with Stave 1. Right, turn to the page where you can find these couple of paragraphs then. If you highlight the quotes that I've done in red and then try and have a go at annotating them with the prompts and the questions that I've put on there for you. Don't worry, I'm going to go through the answers in a little while, but I want to know your opinions first. Here we go then. So the first quote, Marley was dead to begin with. This gloomy horror atmosphere is created straight away. Now let's go one step further, look at that use of punctuation, and the colon that's used there suggests that Marley will not remain dead. As is the same with all of our literature texts, you can say what will happen. The examiner knows that you have read this book, they know that you have studied it, so we have to show that. So doing this is showing that example of foreshadowing straight away. The second quote then, old Marley was dead as a doornail, links in with that again. We know that he becomes the door knocker. We know that Scrooge sees him after he goes home on Christmas Eve. So again, it's more than good to show those links with later on in the text. Now, the effect of the use of the word soul then, this repetition shows that Marley was solitary, he was lonely, the only other person he knew was Scrooge. So it's introducing their relationship at the start of the book, but it shows us that it's not a close relationship. And the fact that Scrooge is not so dreadfully cut up shows that he himself is selfish. And the fact that he goes to work as well, he was an excellent man of business. This is very odd behaviour for a death. And what Dickens is doing here is he's influencing our first impression of Scrooge. He doesn't want us to like him, and he wants us to feel sympathy for the people that Scrooge mistreats throughout the plot. Right, have a look at Scrooge's first introduction here. I've put some prompts at the bottom in the yellow box and really try and annotate it in detail using those prompts there. And then again on this one as well. Pause it, spend a couple of minutes, and then we'll go through some ideas. Okay, so starting off then. The O that the narrator uses here shows the shock. This person is the rudest, meanest, most miserable person that anybody has ever seen. And that short sentence that introduces just emphasises that. We've got these list of negative characteristics here, and again they further influence our opinion. We don't like Scrooge, he's the nastiest man around. What Dickens uses here is the technique of verbose. I've put a definition on your fact sheet, but Dickens loves this technique. He'll always use 20 words where one word will do. But what that ultimately does is create a bond between the reader and the writer and makes us trust him more. We've got the solitary as an oyster, the simile there, which shows that Scrooge is lonely, as shown in solitary. He's greedy and not charitable as well. Think about what an oyster is. So the type of seafood. It's got a pearl inside it. You have to use a special knife to try and prise it open. This is exactly like Scrooge. He has got so much money, he has got so much power, but he's just keeping it to himself. He is not being generous, he is not sharing his wealth with the people that need it. And then we've got this quote here as well, external heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. Nothing changes him, nothing affects him, and this also links in with the later influence of the ghosts. So the more times he sees the ghost, the more he does change, the more he transforms, the more he redeems himself. But in this introduction, Dickens is emphasising that he's unable, he's unwilling to change at all. This is his life, this is his personality. Now, Scrooge is introduced by the narrator for two reasons. One is that it's the narrator influencing our opinion of him. And also, I think you could go one step further and suggest that the narrator is protecting us from the horrible ways of Scrooge. He doesn't want us to be influenced by him. He doesn't want us to be scared or frightened of him. So he's protecting us as well. On this quote here, nobody ever stopped him in the street, is still lonely. People are scared of him. Again, linking in with this idea that the narrator's trying to protect us. And that those couple of quotes at the end of this extract shows his mean attitude. He's stubborn, he's unkind, he's nasty, he's the worst person that we can ever meet. So again, a real good example of verbose. Dickens, I think, has proved his point here that we are not supposed to like Scrooge. Now, going back to context a little bit. This man here in the corner is Thomas Robert Malthus. So I'm going to do a little bit of history. If you do history and you know a lot about the poor laws and the new poor laws, then please feel free to make those cross-curricular links. It will really help push those marks up. Anyway, what Malthus did is he wrote this essay, and he was basically saying that population would always grow quicker than food supplies. So because of that, people would die. There would be a famine and there's not enough food to support this large population. Because of this, he wrote another pamphlet saying that the poor laws needed to be changed. He thought that the original two poor laws were too kind, too generous, and they encouraged laziness from the poor people. So following this, a new poor law was introduced, and this is when the workhouses came into play. Now, the workhouses were horrible. The conditions were supposed to be so mean, so frightening, so dismal that nobody wanted to go there as well, apart from those who were truly destitute, those that were really, really struggling. And people hated this. They feared this threat. So there were, in some cases, there were some riots that took place. Now, it's important, as before we even start studying this, that you know that Dickens opposes this. He disagreed with it totally, and that's why he wrote A Christmas Carol. Now, I think, double check this for me, but I think he wrote a letter to the government, sort of dismissing all of these ideas, and he said, I'm not going to tell you how, I am not going to tell you why, but I am going to write a message that is going to change society's ways. And he says, and the quote is, strike a blow for that poor man's child. Like I say, just double check it was a letter to the government, but the important quote is that strike a blow for the poor man's child. And that's why he wrote A Christmas Carol, to raise awareness of poverty and to share this message that the poor could be helped with the generosity of the rich. And that's shown in this quote here. Again, have a look at this extract, pause it, have a look at the prompts and the questions that I've put at the bottom, and then we can make those contextual links between the text and Malthus. Right, let's go through them then. So this quote here, handed the credentials back. This shows straight away that Scrooge is not interested in supporting the poor. On to the next one then. We've got useful course, which is echoing Malthus's views. At the beginning, Scrooge is echoing his views. Now, endeavouring, for those of you that are wanting to push yourself, endeavouring, if you remember, was the word that Dickens used in the preface. So this is representing the fact that the portly gentlemen are like Dickens, they want to help the poor. And making these links between individual words throughout the text will really show the examiners your thorough understanding of the plot and the techniques used. So that's a good word to remember. And these couple of quotes here then, again, he's unwilling to donate money, it's emphasising his selfishness. And this one here, nice key quote, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. He's got no social responsibility, he doesn't care about people, and he thinks that those who don't contribute to society need to die. Not very nice really, is he? It's really important though, and this is one of your key facts, Scrooge has got to be introduced as the most horrible person. We have got to be unsympathetic for him. We've got to be aware of his ignorance and his reluctance to change. And the reason why Dickens does this is to make his transformation more powerful. What Dickens is saying is, if someone as mean as Scrooge can change, anybody can. There's hope for society and we'll all live happily ever after. Some further examples here then, if you find these in your extracts, got the use of the word melancholy, and that just means miserable, lonely. It's still showing how horrible his life is really. Got the word gloomy there, nobody lived in it. The fact that Scrooge is still living in Marley's old house suggests that he can't really be bothered, he doesn't really care about anything. And then we've got this example of pathetic fallacy. If you can't remember what that is, a technique definition is on your fact sheet. And this pathetic fallacy here represents Scrooge's personality. So basically at the start of the book, everything's cold, everything's dark, everything's miserable. And the darker it gets, the more of Scrooge's mean characteristics are revealed. Just to finish off then, a reminder. So Dickens experienced poverty when he was a child. His dad went into a debtor's prison, he couldn't afford to pay his taxes. And because of this, Dickens himself went to work in a factory. If you remember in year 9 when we studied Oliver Twist, they're kind of similar tales really. Dickens talks about the poor side of society from Oliver Twist and the effects of it on that. And then in A Christmas Carol he focuses on how the rich society can help him. And it's also this social reform that I'm going to be going on about quite a lot throughout the unit. He had a passion for social reform. He wanted to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor, and the quote again, strike a blow for that poor man's child. Now, I know, as usual, I have whizzed through this. I talk very, very fast. Please give me feedback when we're on our Teams chats. If you've got any questions, then one of us will be available to answer questions on there. But otherwise, go back through it, pause it, and just make sure you get those annotations down. And we're going to be carrying on with that in the next lesson. Thanks so much, Year 10. Take care.